I'm Penny Gross, President of VACo and a supervisor in Fairfax County, Virginia. At this time, I would ask that you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Please be seated. I'm very excited that we are together today. County Government Day is about you being directly involved in the legislative process. Many of you will go to the Capitol and advocate, supporting or opposing various bills that affect counties. You may argue, persuade, compliment, or simply talk to legislators and tell them the story of Virginia's 95 counties. We need to put a face on county issues. This is our purpose today. The cities were represented at the Capitol last week, but today is our day, County Government Day. We're excited to be advocating for Virginia's 95 counties, and it's our day to be the face of county government. I'd like to introduce Billy Martin, a supervisor from Botetourt County and president of the Virginia Association of Planning District Commissions. VAPDC has been part of this special day for the past several years. Together we form a strong alliance, and I feel particularly pleased because I also chair the Northern Virginia Planning Regional Commission, which is our PDC for Region 8. So I'm wearing sort of two hats today, maybe on two heads, but I am very pleased to introduce to you Billy Martin, who will take over the rest of this part of the program. Billy?
Thank you and good afternoon. It's good to see such a large crowd here, and Penny, thank you on behalf of the VAPDC. We are honored to be here with our local government colleagues. Each of you should have a copy of the legislative bulletin, which focuses on the top legislative issues facing local government. If you don't have a copy, I'd like for you to raise your hand and we'll get you a copy out there. Does anyone not have a copy? Okay, looks like we're all in good shape. We hope that you will all go to the Capitol this afternoon to watch the session if it's still going on, visit with your legislators, and attend committee meetings. There's a schedule on the back of the legislative bulletin to help you decide which meetings you might want to attend. Now I'd like to introduce our first speaker, the Honorable Aubrey Layne, Secretary of Transportation. Secretary Layne oversees 7 agencies with more than 10,000 employees and combined budgets of over $5 billion. Prior to his appointment, Secretary Layne represented Hampton Roads on the Commonwealth Transportation Board from 2009 to 2014. Secretary Layne began his career as a CPA with KPMG before becoming president and principal broker of Great Atlantic Properties. Secretary Layne and his wife Peggy live in Virginia Beach. So I would ask now that we all give a warm VACo and VAPDC welcome to Transportation Secretary Aubrey Layne.
Thank you. It is good to be here. I look around the room and see many friends. And actually, being not in the General Assembly building, I see a lot of friends that have been over there. So I wish you luck this afternoon as you go around and, obviously work with our legislators and get across the issues that are important to all of you. It's interesting in the introduction, Billy was speaking, mentioned that my background is a little different than probably previous secretaries in that I am not either encumbered nor enlightened with an engineering degree. So my background is in business and finance, and I probably look at things a little more from the view of solutions and pragmatic instead of what we can build or what we should build. It's more what are we doing. And quite frankly, what shapes a lot of my views, and certainly I want to welcome, say on behalf of Governor McCullough, that He sends his best wishes to you all today, but he's of a similar mindset, and that is what we ought to be doing is putting in transportation solutions that either underpin our way of life through making it easier for us to get around, or making it easier for us to get and do our jobs. In fact, if we're not doing it for that, there might be question as to why really are we doing transportation. I believe transportation is a means to an end, not the end in itself. So with that in mind, that has really shaped a lot of the administration's views as we approach problems, and certainly has shaped our legislation that we've done this year. So let me give you a little bit of background. And well, I did understand that you had a session on this before and there were no questions and everybody was happy. So, okay, but anyway, but nonetheless, I hope that I can answer those, give you what we're trying to accomplish, and then get into some of the details as we go through this legislation. House Bill 2313, which was put into enacted back in the final year of Governor McDonald's administration. It was the first time in 35 years that the state, almost 30 years, excuse me, the state had put new monies into transportation. That bill anticipated roughly about $6 billion over the next 6 years from that. And I want to thank our legislators I have many times for their courageous efforts. It was bipartisan and bicameral, passing the legislature, recognizing what transportation does for our economy and for our citizens. So I am one of the first secretaries in a little while that's actually has a little bit of money to work with. And I recognize that. And so I need to be a good steward of that money and make sure our taxpayers see the return on their investment. So a lot of that goes into our thinking as to how we've gone from here. Following that, the first year I came in office with Governor McCullough last year, gosh, it's already been about 12, 13 months. I only have 35 months left, but I'm not counting. But based on that, was directed to work and had the pleasure of working with the Speaker Howe, on House Bill 2. And what House Bill 2 did was it gave the Commonwealth Transportation Board the guidance to use an objective measure on how it allocates the monies across the Commonwealth. In other words, as mentioned, I was on the CTB from 2009 to this past year, 2014. And during that time, unfortunately, I was on at a time when we saw a very, very significant decline in transportation revenues. So we were all trying to get more out of many, many less dollars before House Bill 2313 came on. So it became fairly political. It became much more driven by the executive branch because of, and I'm not saying that's wrong or bad, I'm just saying that's what was going on as we were all competing over how do we get all these many needs accomplished with many, many less dollars than are needed in that regard. So that was sort of what was going on in there. And again, I'm not blaming or saying it's good or bad. I'm just telling you what the process was. Now, 2313 certainly helped that. And House Bill 2 says, now that we have that money, let's take a look at how we're allocating it. It really should be a little more objective. And I think I've stood in front of you, if not in this group, but over the last few months, I've done 2 full tours of the state, 18 public hearings across the state, and we got to talk with many of you. I think you understand the gist of House Bill 2. It's to give the CTB a guide and say, as we line up these projects across the Commonwealth, what is the best return, the best bang for the buck? Now, I'll point out here, though, it's still all at the state level. The Commonwealth Transportation Board is still allocating all the monies across the state level. And I'll point out here at this time that since 2009, I don't think you've had any money flowing to localities or districts through the 40-30-30 formula. So while House Bill 2 did address a competition about how we would compete, and I've had, I know my Deputy Secretary Nick Donahue has done many outreach, as we've done public hearings. We've all had a lot of input into the 5 factors that go into the measuring how the return on investment is going to be done, and we should have something by March or April of this year, our first attempt at letting you see how that's going to work. The law goes into effect 2016. But it still is the Transportation Board at a state level dictating the money going to the various localities and districts across the state. We simply, the way the formulas work, we simply, by the time we take in all the things that come off the top, there is no monies going down to the district or local level. And I heard that loud and clear when we were going around the state talking about House Bill 2, because many people thought it was going to be somehow help them get more money to their particular districts. Now, it will through a competition, but it was no guarantee. And I've heard things, well, it helps the urban areas, it helps the rural areas. I will tell you, it helps every area that I'm not in when I'm speaking to a group that I'm in. And I've heard that all across the state. So I actually believe that it will be, if we get it right, a very, very much fairer process as the CTB makes its decisions. I'll point out, while it's inferred that the CTB would somehow rank the projects and do the highest ranked one first, let me point out the law doesn't require that. But it does say if you don't do that, you better explain to us why. And that's really the benefit that I see under House Bill 2. It brings accountability, transparency, a measuring process. And I know a lot of us are going to get caught up about scores. The absolute score, I'm thinking, will not be what's important. It's how it compares to other projects. That's what's important. If you do it consistently, obviously everybody wants 100, but if you got a 70 and everybody else got a 68, you're in pretty good shape. So the point I'm trying to make is, I don't think we should get caught up on exactly what the absolute score is. It's how it's consistently applied when we get it in place. And I think, I use this analogy. I went to the undergraduate here at the University of Richmond and had the pleasure of playing baseball. And if you play baseball, the strike zone is supposed to be from under your armpits to the top of your kneecaps. Well, that depends on who the umpire is. And after you've batted one time, you understand what the strike zone is going to be for that game. That's the same with House Bill 2. We need to get something out there consistently applied so year after year you understand how this is going to work. So a little bit about House Bill 2 and how this thinking has sort of evolved as we go about being better stewards. But I point out again that we heard loud and clear, well, and I guess that's a better way, but we're still not getting monies down to the local and district levels. And that's what really gave genesis to House Bill 1887. That was well in our thinking, that how do we get that down? I will tell you a couple other things that were paramount in my thinking. It was, again, pointing out that I am the financial background. I served on the CTB for all those years. I'm told every year we don't have any money. And I turn around and we never had any money, but we always seem to find $10 million for some other project. And I'm thinking to myself, well, how does that happen if we don't have any money? So it wasn't very transparent. It wasn't, to me as a CTB member, it wasn't transparent to me how all the monies were going. So that's what was percolating again. That fact and the fact that we were not getting money down to the lowest level, which I believe make the best decisions. If we can get input from the lowest level of making those decisions. I'll tell you one other thing that really stuck out in my mind. I represent the Hampton Roads District, and we had 14 different localities. And there was $118 million that had gone through those formulas over the years that was spread along those 14 localities. Everyone had $5 or $6 million saving it up for a project that was going to be $20 or $30 million. So we had all this money across the district and nothing was getting built because everybody was trying to save working together regionally. I've come and I firmly believe that many of our solutions, the overwhelming of our solutions, are working regionally on getting transportation done. So all that's underpinning sort of the thinking of how we got to House Bill 1887. So working with, in this particular case, Delegate Jones, the Chairman of Appropriations, and Delegate Tom Rust, we started putting together what would be something that would make this situation for them? Could we take it to another step in how we can be better stewards? And one last thing I'll mention here, what you really need to make this work is an independent CTB, an independent Commonwealth Transportation Board that is free to be objective in allocating monies. Many people think that the more people you have on the board, the more money you're going to get. And maybe there's been some times that's true. But if you read the fiduciary responsibility when you go to the board, the oath you take is you represent the Commonwealth of Virginia. And then you try to look out for your area, but your oath is the Commonwealth of Virginia. So, but having independence is key. I believed in there. And as I mentioned earlier, executive influence had crept in. I'm not saying it's bad or good, but I do think it did impinge upon the independence of the CTB, and the CTB had gotten away from a policy board, the way it's supposed to be. It's a policy board, and the Virginia Department of Transportation and the Department of Rail and Public Transit was to execute that policy. But those lines have been blurred because we were all trying to deal with the same small bit of cheese. Again, so our situation's changed. Now, I give you that background because I think if you look at 1887 in that light, it will help explain to where we've gone to. So there are three main provisions of House Bill 1887. By the way, this was also done with a companion bill that if we have time, we'll be happy to hit a little bit. House Bill 1886, which codifies the new regulations that the CTB adopted, the new guidelines that the CTB adopted for public-private partnerships. And let me make it clear, public-private partnerships have to remain a big part of our procurement policy in the Commonwealth. There's no way we can deliver projects that are $1 billion or more in nature without considering that investment. So getting that right, I see my friends that we had to deal with some issues in 460 and other things. Getting that procurement right and getting public trust is paramount to getting our dollars and using those wisely. And I'll come back to that, but let me spend a little bit of time on 1887. So, three components of 1887. And the most, they're all significant, but the most one that probably changes a lot of things the most is the provision on how the monies will be divided up and who controls them across the Commonwealth. If you look, one of the things I told Governor McCullough that when he asked me to consider doing this, I said, you know, I have a business background, and fortunately many of the agencies that report to me have many business-like qualities in that return, efficiencies, and how we use them. So I'm going to approach this as if it's my money, which it is, because I'm a taxpayer, and it should be, but it's our money and how we would allocate that. What makes sense for all of our Commonwealth, and how would we be good fiduciaries? So when I started looking at that, and I don't have, not many of you have the one-pager that lists what the process used to be, but I dare any of you to look at that and put $1,000 at the top and get to the bottom and tell me what the bottom number is after it flows through those formulas. And I'm a CPA. I mean, so it's very, very bungled, very difficult to follow in that. So when I looked at it, there's really three areas the Commonwealth ought to be concerned about with its monies. The first is state of good repair. And the state of good repair ought to be every piece of real estate that we own in transportation, no matter whether it's at the city, the county, or the state level. The law says we are to maintain that infrastructure. And I found that there were times some administrations said that meant, well, it's just state things we should take care of. But my belief is that it should be taken care of across the Commonwealth, and that's what we believe the law is, the Governor McCullough's belief is. So that, I can't tell you how many districts I've been to that they have a bridge that they can't replace, a small bridge, because it either crosses two localities and they can't get cooperation from the other locality, or they're saving up their money's coming through the formula, which they don't know when they're coming, and yet they're not attacking it. That bridge ought to be replaced. And so the first 40% of the monies, on the House Bill 1887, and these are construction monies. Let me point out, 6-year plan, nothing to do with maintenance. We have about $5 billion budget, about $2.5 billion goes to maintenance, and roughly $2.5 billion goes to construction. Talking about the construction dollars. And half of that money comes from the federal government, which was another topic altogether, but assuming they continue to fund us, we have about $2.5 billion for construction. So, right off the top, 40% of those monies are going to be used for state of good repair. Now, we didn't make that number up. We had VACo go out and through their asset management programs, look across the Commonwealth as to what they would need to do to stop this decline, what type of funding they needed to stop this decline of our good repair. And that's where they came back with the 40%. We needed that, and it's going to take us a while to dig out of it. Remember, it's been 30 years since we started attacking this. You saw the report this past week in the paper. We've moved up from a D to a C-. We've got a long ways to go, but that's what VDOT says through its asset management, that it needs to get all our Commonwealth beginning to trend upward on our state of good repair. Now, it also goes on to say that ought to be determined by the districts. We know in every district that we have state of good repair. That district knows better than we do at the state level. So I'll come back to that, but the state of good repair is the first pot of money. And as I go through these pots, let me point out, they're not mutually exclusive. An organization or an entity or a locality can get money from any one of these pots. So I'll keep that in mind as we go through. So state of good repair, asset management, VDOT looks out, and there'll be an allocation out to the districts. The law says no one district can get over 17.5%, because if you're looking at the asset management program, we want to make sure we're carrying through all the districts, and that's what they thought was needed to make sure we could bend the curve in every district, with one exception. I would say if the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel fell in the water, it does have an exception that you're able to use monies to repair an emergency. And I could have picked the bridge over the Potomac, so I'm not trying to single out an area. But that's the only exception as we go through. And there is some exception in there for maintaining secondary roads and pavements if they're not up to speed. So there are a couple, but mainly it's saying this, get it out to the districts and let's start working on our state of good repair. And the districts determine what that is as we go through. The second pot of money is what we all would consider at the statewide level under House Bill 2. 30% of the money would be at the Commonwealth Transportation Board. And they would be the one that they're doing now. These projects that you submit across the Commonwealth would be lined up and go through the scoring process, the prioritization, and then as monies become available, they're lined up and done. Again, I would point out here, every entity in this room has the ability to put a project into that pot of money. It just will be scored at the statewide level. The third part of money, 30%, will now be allocated to the districts. Every district, based on the old 40-30-30 formula that's been accepted, I don't know, 1993 or when it went in. It adjusts itself based on population amount, but the same percentages that you would have gotten to the districts from the old model, which, by the way, we're not showing any coming in until 2021, at the very least. And my guess, if we stayed with the old model, it would be past that, because state of good repair probably is going to need more money as we go through if we don't adjust it this way. But it's the same allocation that you would have gotten had you gotten money through the old formula. And now that will go to the district level, and every district will then go through a House Bill 2 competition and determining how to allocate those monies in the district. Now, some are going to say, well, that doesn't guarantee money coming to my locality. No, it doesn't. But I would say it does over a period of time, it certainly will. Because every locality, every district has needs that are either through state of good repair or through competitions at the state or district level. But what it will do is make sure that the projects that are lined up, they get done. How many of you were sitting here and said, oh, I finally got money's coming, I got a project. Whoops, it's gone. Because we had a revision to the plan. This, if you think about going back to before, now there is certainty when the money gets to the district. We have a pipeline of projects. Once it gets on, it doesn't come off, it goes through execution. Now, this does not include the 2 regional monies that we have in Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads. That pot of money is separately controlled. I would say probably as we go on, the way those projects are scored ought to be consistent with House Bill 2 or vice versa. But I think that's something we can work out and with them going forward. But I pointed out these are not mutually inclusive buckets. I hope you figure out a way to game the system. I hope you figure out a way to use district monies with a statewide project, because the intent here is to get projects built. Not be setting, I've come to understand that many people thought if you've been allocated money, you've done something. Allocations don't get projects built. Expenditures get projects built. We've got to get them lined up. So that's the thinking behind House Bill 1887. It passed the House 96-2 yesterday. I'm fairly comfortable that it will get through the Senate, unless maybe you all might want to run out here and say you don't like it, but no, I think that bipartisan, and I believe we'll have bicameral support. And the issue is getting back to making sure we're being good stewards and getting projects built. Now, I started this conversation by saying many of our projects are regional in nature. And it will entice us to work together as regions. Now, the bill does not eliminate revenue sharing. So revenue sharing will still be a part and come off the top before we do it. But I will say this, it'll probably be a smaller pot of revenue sharing. I don't know what that number will be. It's up to $185 million, $100 million now. It will probably be reduced. But why did that grow? It grew because it was the only source of monies you had. It grew because you were trying to revenue share on state of good repair. That should come off the top and get done, but it will still be there. The revenue sharing will still be there. So I know we're going to get into details, but that is the first large component of House Bill 1887. The second component deals with the independence of the Commonwealth Transportation Board. Right now, they serve totally at the pleasure of the governor, just like I did. If I walk in tomorrow and I have a pink shirt on, not my purple shirt, and the governor doesn't like it, he can excuse me. Now, I'm not going to be a little facetious, but it serves totally at the pleasure, and I will give Governor McCullough credit. From day one, he has never asked me for political reasons to do anything in transportation. He has told me, I said, Governor, we have a governor's list. He said, we don't have a governor's list. We have a project list that makes sense with the Commonwealth. So, I mean, what party you're in, and the governor likes to point out, I'm one of his turncoats. I'm a Republican in a Democratic Party. I'm not sure what I am anymore, but nonetheless, that's what he likes to say. It doesn't matter. We don't have a list. We have a list that we need to fix Virginia's transportation system. And I applaud Governor McCullough for taking that attitude. And he understands governance. He said, I understand it needs to be an independent CTB. So the second part of this provision is now the CTB, once appointed by the governor and confirmed by the legislature, can only be removed for cause, just like our universities and other things. So when I was on the CTB, we had a project that we prayed with me with the ladies up here I know are familiar with. We had an individual who didn't vote the way the governor wanted, and he was removed. That shouldn't happen. It should not happen. Not when you're talking about billions of dollars. I'm not saying that I'm criticizing, but it should not happen if you really want a policy board that's objective and looking across the Commonwealth. So that's the second thing that this legislation does. The third thing, it addresses an issue that we have in transit. House Bill 2313 anticipated that the Marketplace Fairness Equity Act would pass. It did not pass, and I don't think it's going to pass in the foreseeable future. The key to that was there was a fail-safe in 2313 that raised the wholesale sale of gasoline tax from 3.5 to 5.1%. The problem is when it runs through those formulas, the way it's allocated much different than transit would have been allocated under Marketplace Fairness Equity Act. And therefore, all the other programs got fairly good increases, and transit got zero. Not quite zero, it's very little, but I will tell you, in 2012, we had $280 million across the Commonwealth spent on transit. If 283 million. In 2021, if we don't do something, we'll spend 280. We'll have an absolute decrease in dollars in transit across the Commonwealth. Now, this is not fixed guideway. This is not the light rail. This is vehicles. This is infrastructure. The things that under TSDAC that have to be prioritized and are reimbursed now at 68%. This bill moves $40 million from the other programs each year into transit to compensate for some of the monies that would have come under Marketplace Fairness Equity Act and keep our reimbursement at 68%. We think $40 million will allow us to keep it at 68%. So it's not an absolute dollar to the other programs. Port of Virginia got $3.7 million through the gas tax allocation last year. Under 1887, we'll get $4.1 million. Actually more, but it would have gotten substantially more had we not done it. Transit would have not gotten anything. And that's the way it is across the other programs too. You know we took some money from rail, but we made sure, I think it's about $9 million, but we made sure we have never ever as a Commonwealth obligated anywhere near that amount of money. We have huge reserves, so we are not impacting the ability for us to support our rail in the Commonwealth. So the third part of this is that we transfer those monies from those other programs to transit. The bill was designed, if Marketplace Fairness Equity Act does come into existence, this reverses. It goes back to what was contemplated. So that's the third major part of House Bill 1887. Now there are two, I think they're minor, but I'll leave that up to you, two other lesser provisions. One is that in the Commonwealth, we have all these pots of money, one called the Tolling Facilities Fund. What that is the interest that we earn on our cash reserves, about $10 or $11 million a year, that was going to be used as the Commonwealth did tolling projects across the state. Well, the Commonwealth's not going to do that anymore. It'll be done by third parties or other governments, but the state will not go into any more of the tolling business. So those monies will now go 2/3 into the Virginia Transportation Infrastructure Bank, which is again a facility that anyone in this room can apply for a loan from. Right now, we don't have a continuing ability to fund that, so this would put $7 or $8 million a year. And then the other third would go into the Governor's Priority Transportation Fund, about $3 million a year. I see my friends from Isle of Wight. This would be, if we put a road in there and we need to get an access road to their facility, to their park, this is the fund that would be used to get that access road in there. Not everything should have to go through House Bill 2. If we get a major employer wants to come somewhere and we need to get a road there, that's what this priority fund is for, to make sure we can attract that in there. So about 3 million years would go there. And the last piece is that anybody that knows the 95 corridor knows that it is key to not only our rail, or transit operations, whether it be passenger rail or freight rail, all are key to that corridor. And we all know it is clogged. It is at capacity. So if we want more trains elsewhere in the state, if we want more freight to our port, we have got to get more capacity. Jennifer Mitchell and I have been working with our partners at CSX about getting additional capacity in that particular area. It's going to require hundreds of millions of dollars. So there's a provision in here that allows, it sunsets, I think, in 3 years,
to see if we can do a long-term funding agreement with, and this is meant to be CSX, here, a long-term funding agreement to see if we can put additional capacity in there to help the 95 corridor. I'm speaking from Richmond to Northern Virginia, Washington, but I would say it impacts everyone in the Commonwealth. Whether it's trains to Roanoke, whether it's to Norfolk, whether it's in the corridor, whether it's freight to our port, we have got to get more capacity through 95. So that is House Bill 1887. I think I would ask you to view it in its totality. I know there's a thing on the front that says, I get X, and you look, and I get this. If you were to take where the transit is divided up, if you were to take how you would be able to score across the Commonwealth, I think you'll find that every locality in here, every district in the Commonwealth, every region benefits. Now, you might say, well, how can that be? It's because we're putting more monies through the formula to the district. We have the same piece of pie, we're just putting them down to the district level, running it through there so that they can actually get on projects. And every one of those pots of money is either asset managed, looked at, or competitively bid either at the state or local level. So we're getting good projects, good fiduciaries. That's behind it. So I know people like to keep score. I think this is hard to keep score because everybody wins. And the sheets we passed out were just from the pots of money that we know will be passed down through state of good repair and the district-wide. And let me tell you, there's two reasons for putting those sheets of money out. Number one is to be exemplary of what we're trying to do. But number two is to hold us accountable. And you're going to know here in about a few months if we've done this right, because in the sixth year of the six-year plan, you should see monies coming to your district. And if it doesn't agree to these sheets, you should be in my office asking me why. And I think that's one thing that I've really found strange being from the private sector up here. I spent most of my time in the private sector working on things that were broke. Yeah, because it cost me the most money. If things are going well, I'm fine. Up here, everyone wants to talk about all the things we're doing good and don't want to talk about the things that are broken. That's alien to me, and I don't mean to say that we're not doing a lot of good things, but we have got to use these monies wisely. We have got to make sure they're actually getting done on projects. We don't want our taxpayers to turn around and say, well, I'm now paying more taxes, and what have I got? I mean, so I think our citizens deserve that. So I've sort of droned on here, but I'm sorry? Yes, I'll be happy and to take any questions, and if I don't know the answer, I'll be happy to tell you I don't know and get you the answer. So.
Ruby Bravo, King George County.
Good morning. Good afternoon, excuse me.
Yes, I actually was really thrilled to hear you say that basically you're not an engineer and your approach is more of a common sense approach.
I don't know common sense, but it's the difference.
That's the way I interpreted it, and it's very refreshing. We had a project in King George County that just recently finished, a major intersection project that we do not feel addressed the safety concerns. It originally was bid as a $2 million project, but then federal monies were applied to it and it was expanded to a $4 million project. And the response I received from VDOT was, well, we received this money, we have to spend it. So I'm asking you, are you going to ensure that those types of things don't continue to occur? Because to us, in the locality, we feel like you just wasted a lot of money.
Well, if you'd be happy to give me that UPC number, I will tell you I'll follow up. And in their defense, I don't think that if that was the answer you were given, it obviously is not an appropriate, I don't think is appropriate use of funds or the right answer. But part of what was going on is that various pots of money were only used for various things. Let's take safety monies. The law says that there's a lot more that we could use safety for than what I found VDOT was using it for. Now, I'm not saying it's, that what they were using for is wrong, but we found and believe there's a lot more flexibility. I don't know if many of you know Nick Donahue, my deputy secretary.
Well, Nick has a lot of attributes, and one of them he is, and I see Tom Shadio, I know he worked a lot. Nick is a policy wonk. I think that's fair to say, Tom, when you say, I think that's right. One of the great things, Governor McAuliffe let me pick the people I wanted, and I'm very appreciative. I knew I needed somebody like that. And I don't want to just characterize, he has a lot of talent, but he does, both at the federal and state level. And we found a lot of programs that we were used to, we've got to use it for safety. I'm not saying, we shouldn't, but I'm saying, no, we have other uses. So instead of being driven by an outcome, program, that's where I'm saying we need to step back. These are our needs. Now, how can we use the money to best address our needs? Clearly, there are some monies that can only be used for safety. And CMAC, congestion mitigation, those things, clearly those programs, but it's a small part. Most of it is very flexible. And that's the other thing, that I didn't go into that, what we're challenging and going through, and I'll put this as politely as I can because I've been having this conversation with VDOT. It's not VDOT's money. It's the Commonwealth's Transportation Board's been entrusted with the citizens' money to spend it. And that's a big change. Remember I said about, because other administrations, lack of funds, I won't get it, like that control. But that's not what it is. It's the Commonwealth's money that the policy board has been charged with making sure it makes the best decisions. It should not abdicate its decisions to the executing agency. I'm not talking, I actually think there's a lot of great people in VDOT, and I learned that first coming into office in their emergency response with the snowstorms and stuff. So I'm not, but they have been, programmed because I've also found a lot of people like control, and if I don't tell you, then that means I have a little more control. That is not the way this administration is approaching it. We have some significant issues in the Commonwealth that need to be dealt with. The next CTB meeting, there'll be a large presentation on state of good repair. We're not in good shape. We have got to start bending that curve in that. So I'll be happy to look specifically about that comment. But that's another thing that we're looking at is exactly how are we using our monies.
Bill Kiger from Rockingham County in the Shenandoah Valley.
Hey, Bill.
Well, I guess, I hear what you're saying, and I don't know whether to like this thing or how to, because it's new. It's a change.
No, I understand that.
And the matrices, everything is not certain. There's no certainty to anything. It's an awful lot of trust. I guess my concern has to be that we're going to make a decision that's going to have such a long-term effect on the vitality of the Commonwealth and its localities, because this formula is probably going to be in play for the next, or whatever we come up with for the next foreseeable future, 20, 30, 40 years. So we got to make sure we do this right. And my concern always when we look at long-term things is we get caught up in the short-term benefit and fail to see the long-term unintended consequences. And one of the things I want to make sure is that we don't get into with the competitive aspect of this thing, that we don't get into the business of pitting communities against communities or regions against regions. We've got to make sure that somewhere in this thing that there's going to be some equity applied, because one man's bridge in Hampton Roads is no less or no more important than one man's bridge in Rockingham County. We had a bridge collapse in our county. It took 3.5, 4 years before we could get it passed. And it was a major bridge for farm to market. Right? We represent agriculture, the number one agricultural county in Virginia, and agriculture is the number one export overseas, and export is the largest part of our economy. And so I hope that the measurements and the matrices that go into that thing consider all those aspects as well. I know the 95 corridor is important, but also know Interstate 81 is crowded and very dangerous. And you talk about 95, and you talk about Hampton Roads, but I haven't heard you talk much about west of the Blue.
I'll be happy to talk about that. I think you just made my case for 1887, because you have no certainty now. You have no certainty that you get anything
You don't. You have no certainty at all. You entrust the state to determine where all these monies go in that. I understand it's a change. And I'd be happy to speak about 81. In fact, I'm working with Delegate Steve Landis, and we're convening a group of all the legislators and the CTB members and the CT and the VDOT people up and down 81, because we've been talking about building this monstrosity out there for years. It's never going to happen. What we ought to be doing is having a plan of how we're going to be doing the safety and getting those things in each district, money to each district, so we can do them. So I'm coming on a little strong, Bill, because exactly what you're saying is, I think, why we got to do this. Because we don't have certainty. And as far as competition, that's what we have now. I mean, I can tell you in Hampton Roads, you couldn't get one city to talk to the other and put their monies together to get a project done. I mean, and I will tell you, one area that I was very impressed, and I told this to them last night, which really got me on this, and they were not happy when I was there because it was a project that they didn't like, and that was the Salem district in the Olympia. They were not happy with talking to me, but I was very impressed with how they had assessed their regional needs and lined up their projects working together. So I think that is key. That's why we got to promote. But I think we have competition now. That bridge should have never been weighted. That bridge should have been fixed in state of good repair. That bridge you're speaking about. I happen to use those because I'm from the area. There was one in Bristol that it was a $16 million bridge across 2 localities. And they were so excited that it took them, after 12 years, they finally put together $14 million. No way it should have taken 12 years. I mean, so, Bill, I understand and change is different. And I will also point out, I read this a lot, because of previous, I don't want to be disparaging anybody, but a lot of people like power, and they like to control the monies. And what I'm saying is we ought to put them out there where you guys can see what's happening. But I agree with you. Now let me address the point about long term. You're right. This does. But here's the good news. You're going to know in a few months. It does. We don't have any monies for the next 4 years. They're all obligated. I should point out that everything that's in the system is going to be happening. So you will have ample opportunity if what you see happening to come back. Now, I understand what you're saying. You got to get it up. But, Bill, I think that's exactly why we got to do this, because right now it's a whole lot of control and a very few amount of people. I'm not suggesting that they have any bad intent. But I am suggesting that if we get it to the localities at the district level, they sure know how to a lot better than I think I do at the state level. And I don't think every project should be bid against other projects in the state. That's why we're getting some to the district level. But I certainly appreciate what you're saying. And again, I don't mean to be coming strong, but I wanted to. I think that's exactly why we've got to do this. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, one more, excuse me.
Sarah Carter, academic. As a representative for a rural locality, one of the things that we're most concerned about is the Rural Rustic Roads program. We have dirt roads, not just our county, but the counties all over us. These are not little tiny neighborhoods served by dirt roads. These are communities, major thoroughfares in our county that are dirt roads. The only way we've got to chip away at these is the Rural Rustic Road program. There's no way we're ever going to be able to compete regionally. There's no congestion. There's no economic development. There's no regional impact to improving those. How are we going to be able to chip away at those rural rustic roads, getting pavement out where we've got citizens?
To the state of good repair that gets allocated to your district.
You know, tell us they're in good repair.
Well, that's not, if you look at this law, the paving roads, there's a provision in there for paving, and that at the state level and the district level, they have the ability to set aside, I think, I don't have the exact numbers, but monies every year. And I think that you'll find that's not the way this works. Now, I'll go check that, but the state of good repair, if you want a road paved, a dirt road should fall in that.
And there are specific guidelines at the district and at the state level, at the CTB level, for the 30% that we can set aside if we're not meeting those goals. But I will follow up, because I wasn't aware that you were getting that from VDOT, but I will follow up on that. Okay, I've been told that I must exit the stage. I appreciate you listening to me today. My door is open. I'm happy to come talk to your groups. Nick Donahue, I would just ask you to look at the bill in total and try to work through. It's not intended to help the Commonwealth. And so I appreciate everybody's attention. Thank you for having me today.
Mr. Secretary, thank you very much for sharing your information this afternoon. Certainly transportation and transit, which includes transit, is important to the growth of the Commonwealth and the growth of our economy. Thank you very much for your time.